Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. We start with cricket. Despite the easing of COVID-19 lockdowns in several countries and the resumption of some professional sporting events, this year's men's T20 World Cup in Australia may not get the green light. Chairman of the Pakistan Cricket Board, Ehsan Mani, says the tournament is likely to be played next year. He says the biggest challenge in Australia, although Australia and New Zealand, they have controlled COVID-19, their governments are very cautious. If it is played this year, they will likely insist it happens in a bio bubble. Like with the Pakistan team in England, teams come, stay in a hotel with no crowds. This is okay for 1 or 2 teams, but when 12 to 16 teams play in a T20 tournament, it becomes an impossible thing. I don't think it is feasible today that there is any ICC event in 2020. Mani joins his fellow ICC board member, Cricket Australia chairman Earl Eddings, in favouring the postponement of the event. According to Mani, the ICC will have to be flexible. I sit on the ICC and we're having meetings as we speak. It's a bit of a moving feast at the moment. I'd say it's unlikely, while it hasn't been formally called off this year or postponed, trying to get 16 countries into Australia in the current world where most countries are still going through COVID-19 spiking. I think it's unrealistic or would be very, very difficult. We've put forward a number of different options to the ICC we're working through at the moment. So George and Lance, of course, the pointers that Ehsan has made, it's some feasible options. Except for me, I think that it's too soon to make a decision where this is concerned because this tournament is to be held in October and November. So my personal view when I read the story was that I would have monitored what took place with the West Indies and then come out and make a decision like this. Lance, I'll start with you. Do you think it's too soon to say something like that?
When you say start with the West Indies, you mean what happens in the England-West Indies tour?
Like just monitor.
Yeah, well, that is not the best measuring stick to use because there are only 2 teams involved in the West Indies-England tour.
Right.
The ICC championship will involve so many teams, and that complicates the issue significantly. I think what we are hearing from Ehsan Mani and the Cricket Australia chairman is an acceptance that given the trajectory and how COVID-19 has affected the world globally, it is unrealistic, was the word Eddings used, to think that things can improve significantly enough, even though it appears that we're months ahead of the October date. But given the trajectory, it is still hard to see how they can, get an atmosphere in place to stage the event. I know the Australian Cricket Association would be the last association to want to hurriedly make a decision. And I think if they're one of the main men in Cricket Australia is already taking this position, I think you can take the cue from him that the odds heavily favour a cancellation or a postponement of the ICC T20 World Cup.
George?
I don't think it's too early for them to make the call. I don't want to make light of the general point, but if you were organizing a fish fry for October and in July you haven't printed tickets and sent them out, it will be late, let alone an international tournament involving scores of players, or hundreds of players and officials, beg your pardon. So you have to rent hotels, you have to book facilities, you have to deal with the logistical moving of equipment. Broadcasters have to get their equipment in place. They have to sort out which workers are going. They have to run the workers through the health protocol. They have to first design that health protocol. They have to do accommodating for equipment. I'm not talking about accommodation for individuals. The accommodation of equipment on site in the host venue. A whole lot of things go into planning an international style event, and it's not for optics that international events announce from a year or 2 earlier where they are going next, because bet your bottom dollar that by the time they announce where they are going, the work has already started. So if they signpost 18 months before that this event is happening 18 months from now, work to get to the 18-month point starts the day the announcement is made. So if you're in July, and even though we all knew that Australia would have been the venue, but the world has changed, the world has gone topsy-turvy since the World T20 was originally penciled into the slot in the calendar. So much has changed. So if you're in June, not even July, you're in June, and you don't know whether or not you are going forward, I would say you're terribly late to go ahead, and with the logistical problems. Mind you, one of the things that has also struck the organizers is the fact that those countries that have opened up after COVID-19, they're seeing spikes now in infections. This suggests, well, what they were banking on was that people who opened up after the worst of the COVID-19 had passed in their territory would have been able to see a kind of controlling of the spread of infections, giving them confidence that this would carry through to when the event comes into town. If you look at what's happened in New Zealand, the government was lauded, Jacinda Ardern and her government was lauded for the way they had kept COVID in control, and New Zealand was COVID-free, and there was a party, only for a spike in cases caused by two women who were let out of a quarantine facility to attend to a relative who was dying, and then those two women infected several other people, and now New Zealand have had to call in the military to man the borders and to man the quarantine facilities to ensure nothing like this happens again. So the point is, the best laid plans are laid waste by the fact that the COVID-19 situation is one of flux. It's a continuous change, and if by this point in June you are not ready for certain for October 2020, it's not going to happen October 2020, and they'd be best advised to pick a next date sometime next year.
I think we can also be guided, Mariah and George, by what the IPL organizers are saying, because they are looking at the possibility of the World Cup being postponed. They still have been banking on a window between September and November for the IPL. And if it is that the ICC T20 World Cup isn't being staged, they are seeing the IPL as gaining traction. And the difference between the two tournaments is, as we have mentioned before, that an ICC championship involves 12 teams. That would be almost 200 players, plus the team staff and so on, converging in one country. Whereas we've already heard the IPL suggesting that maybe foreign players would not be a part of the current IPL. So the IPL are themselves entertaining the thought of still having a postponed IPL before October, and the logistics are a little bit different for the IPL, even though I would side with George that even an IPL format at the moment looks doubtful. And I bookend that point, Mariah, just before you go, after what Lance said. The IPL are dicing with danger, because given that they've been waiting on the ICC men's T20 to decide, and they've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and time keeps moving and moving and moving, the IPL is coming down to the point where they are likely to start their tournament at the back end of September. You know what September is? It's monsoon season in that part of Asia. Rains of biblical proportions for those of you who follow the Bible. So the IPL is still dicing with danger, even if it goes with a late September start, because there's no guarantee that any cricket at all will be played.
What I get from what you and Lance say, though, is that this planning obviously would have begun like a year in advance and whatnot, which means the planning for this World Cup would have started a while now.
But you're missing one thing, my friend. You're missing the fact that those plans were interrupted by COVID.
Right. But
so under normal circumstances, I get what you're saying, that the stencil would have been laid out for you just to fill in the spaces. But that would have been so had the normal passage of time and the normalcy of things been allowed to happen. COVID prevented a lot of the preparatory work which was to have gone in from going in, and that's why we are where we are.
So what about the financial hit that they might face?
They're going to take a financial hit, because postponement is going to cause one. Look, make no mistake about it. Once you have something planned and funds committed for a particular time, and you postpone that event, you're going to take a financial hit. Yeah. So that's no doubt. It's how to manage that fall off, and how to get your sponsors and your supporters, your financiers, to recommit for another time next year, and to see how best you can salvage something that would have been damaged by the fact that it was postponed from the original date.
Yeah, if the IOC can take a major financial hit from the postponement of the Olympic Games, George and Mariah, I would think that all other events, sporting-wise, would fall, a lot lower on the ladder, based on the impact of a postponement is concerned.
Except the IOC would make back the money quickly. Some of these cricket tournaments sort of struggle.
They're not making back money.
Yeah.
They're
It's
losing
too much.
heavily.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's too much money to make back.
So continuing now, outstanding former Test umpire Steve Slodet Bucknor says Sir Viv Richards is the best batsman he has seen. The 74-year-old Bucknor, who stood in 5 consecutive 50 overs World Cup finals, was speaking on the popular Mason and Guest show on VOB Radio in Barbados.
Sir Viv Richards, the master blaster, he destroyed everything in front of him.
Right.
And in the years that he was there when I was umpiring, yes, you might be beaten once or twice, but then he's going to get you later on. And he, as a master blaster, I rate very, very highly on my list that he destroys every bowling, bar none, wearing his floppy hat or maybe his cap. And then there's Fran Lara, who I think is the best thing the eyes can behold when he's on the go. It is poetry in motion. He does things that others can't do. So once he's on the go, then Lara is the batsman that I enjoy umpiring. In other words, I don't want to be a spectator when Lara is batting. I want to be in the middle to enjoy the cricket there, because as a human, as someone who has played the game, you must enjoy the game out there now. Umpires enjoy the game. In your heart, you cheer, you clap in your heart to see a good shot. You clap in your heart to see a good delivery. Yes, you enjoy that, but you cannot show it on your face, you can't show it in your eyes, you can't show it anywhere. And the third person is Sachin Tendulkar. He's the best accumulator of runs. Whenever he's playing Test cricket, he bats for one person. He bats for Sachin. And whatever happens at the other end, not very often, you know, he seems perturbed.
Well, we see Steve definitely enjoyed his stint as an umpire. He says he rather watch Viv when he's in the middle as opposed to being on the stands. So Lance and George, Viv obviously very destructive as a batsman. When I looked at all his averages are over 40, ODI, Test, T20, all formats. He didn't make our SportsMax Ultimate Test 11. Lance.
That was hugely disappointing for me, quite frankly. But not surprising that Steve Bucknor is taking the position that he has taken here. You see, Steve Bucknor is a person steeped in sport, and not only as a coach or an umpire, he was also a FIFA football referee as well. So it's someone who grew up and he has sports in his genes, and it was very interesting to hear him say just now that as an umpire, even though you have to be standing in an objective position and not taking his sides, he just conceded there that when certain people were on the go, Lara, Ivy Richards and so on, that he applauded in his heart. It's just that he had to be in the middle and objective and not show his emotions. But no praise too high for Ivy Richards. Most cricket experts who lived through the years of Ivy Richards believe that he is the best batsman of all time. And I know that is something that you can never find a conclusive position on, but he certainly warrants being in an all-time World Test 11. He made our ODI 11, the SportsMax Ultimate 11, but he wasn't a part of the Test 11, was he?
Yeah, I don't want to have the Viv Richards debate all over again, but it's when you examine his record. I showed there were some men on the production team, the SportsMax production team, who were upset that he didn't make the Test 11, and I took the liberty of going to Howstat and showing them the last, I think, 20 innings of Sir Viv's career. I think those 20 innings produced, 2 centuries or something like that. It was a slow, painful end to one of the greatest careers in Test cricket history. And that was what, for me, satisfied me that, okay, they bumped him out of the Test 11. I wasn't going to cry over it, because the dying embers of his career it was a painful thing to see a man of his stature burning out as slowly as he did. Think of a cigarette that someone has lit, and they take 2 puffs and they put it down, and you watch it in an ashtray just burn, and you're there watching. Will this thing burn out or what? And it just burns slowly. That was Sir Viv's career ending, while some other people exploded to finish. Lara's last 20 innings, wow, there were centuries galore and big scores galore. So it's just by comparison, when you look at those records, you realize that there were people who were outstanding in their contributions and consistent with their contributions throughout, as opposed to Sir Viv, who had these otherworldly peaks at the early points in his career and midpoint, but the end was just a painful thing to watch. Steve Bucknor said something about Tendulkar batting for Tendulkar only. Don't I know it? There was a test series in England, India versus England, I was watching. Yuvraj Singh was batting at the other end. He got a nasty knock on the hand, on his right hand. And, well, Yuvraj Singh is a right-hander. Yes, he got a nasty block on the left hand. You're right. So he's a left-hander, got it on his right hand. So my memory is correct. Got it on his right hand. He required lengthy treatment and everything. I thought he would have left the field, but India was in a precarious position, and Tendulkar and himself were repairing the innings. And he got treatment for about 12, 15 minutes. That was how long they were working on the hand, trying to get it back so he could put it in the glove and hold the bat without too much pain, debilitating pain. And do you know that after Yuvraj got treatment, Tendulkar faced, it was like the second ball of the over, he probably took a single. I'm like, what? Yuvraj on strike, the next ball, Yuvraj loses his middle stump. So I'm saying Tendulkar, yeah, Tendulkar bats for himself. I really believe that.
Well, Bucknor, who officiated in 128 tests and 181 ODIs, says Shane Warne is the best bowler he has ever seen. George, do you agree with Bucknor in this part?
Shane Warne, as I said during the ultimate discussions, for my generation, boys born in the 80s in Jamaica, when we were growing up, of course, by the time we were able to really make sense of the cricket without an adult or an older person telling us, we were seeing Shane Warne for Australia in the West Indies, and they made a lot, the commentators, of the revolution of his hand, what he did with his wrist, how the ball was coming out, the ultra slow motion was showing then, and in my head now I can hear Ian Healy saying, well, ball shine, good morning, Warney, and the slips and everything, encouraging him, and him having on the sunblock on his lips and his face, everything. Shane Warne was the first bowler who enthralled us, was the first bowler who had us just at the television watching, what did he just do? And we would leave watching the cricket, go out onto the little strip in front of my friend's house and try to turn a tennis ball the way Shane Warne bowled a cricket ball. That was the effect he had on us. He was a superstar. If Bucknor says he was the best he had ever seen, I'll not argue because Shane Warne was so good, but I have other bowlers who I rate higher than him, and of course they're all fast bowlers.
And significant that Steve Bucknor, who comes from a territory of the Caribbean, that is, steeped in fast bowling history, that he would suggest that a spin bowler is the best he has ever seen in his entire time watching international cricket. But Shane Warne's stocks are very, very high. There's no question about it. He was commanding while he, played international cricket, and significant for me that Bucknor would choose Shane Warne as the best bowler he has ever seen. I didn't expect I wouldn't have expected that answer from Bucknor, as I said. I think the fast bowlers, one of the greats, Ambrose, Marshall, would probably have headed that list for Bucknor, but he has been closer to it than we have, so we've got to respect his views.
Well, as we go to break, why not give your father a gift that you can't afford to pay for? Of course, we are telling you to rep your dad on SportsMax. We are celebrating fathers all around the world. You are to send us a 25-second video with a message or memory about your father via Instagram, Facebook, or WhatsApp. General messages are welcomed, as well as sports-related memories. And of course, you get the chance to see these messages on SportsMax and Scene TV. We take a short break.